Hey everybody, I hope that you're doing well. I am so happy today to celebrate the birth of one of my absolute favorite authors, Mr. Everett Lynn Harris, aka E. Lynn Harris. E. Lynn was a phenomenal writer. He was born on June 20th, 1955, and unfortunately passed away in July of 2009 from a heart attack. I was devastated. Oh my goodness. Just really heartbroken because he was such a great writer. He wrote contemporary African American fiction. He was an openly gay man, so he wrote about bisexuality and homosexuality in the Black community in a way that I had never read before. He was a trailblazer in my eyes. Now, I know a lot of people have read Baldwin, but I can assure you, E. Lynn's writing very different from Baldwin. Brilliant writer, but just on a different spectrum. His books were full of mess and nonsense and foolishness and funny characters and characters you love to hate, drama, flawed people, trifling people, and I loved every bit of it. I really did. He started writing like in the mid to late 1990s, and initially he couldn't get published. And so he self-published, and then he knew his target market was Black women. So he went where the Black women were. He sold his books at book clubs, at churches, at beauty salons, through word of mouth. And he knew somebody who knew somebody, and a publishing house picked him up, and the rest is history. So I don't have a copy of his first book, Invisible Life, but I do have copies of some of his other novels that I want to show you. We have If This World Were Mine, I Say a Little Prayer, In My Father's House, Abide With Me, and then I have his memoir, What Becomes of the Brokenhearted. I talked about this a little bit in my nonfiction book tag. Check out that video if you haven't seen it. But yes, E. Lynn had a very hard time growing up. He suffered abuse at the hands of his stepfather, who used to call him names and beat him, call him sissy and all kinds of things. He also had a difficult time in his relationships with men, well, initially even coming out, but in his relationships with men as well. But for a while, like many other men, remember we're talking about this was in the 80s and 90s. A lot of men were living dual lives and not being their authentic selves. They were still in the closet and what was known as the down low brothers. And so I learned a lot by reading his novels because that world was just so unfamiliar to me. But let me read this passage to you that he wrote. After Friday evening happy hour wound down and patrons left for dinner and house parties, I would go to my apartment and change into tight jeans and muscle shirt and cowboy boots and head to the old plantation. Much to my surprise, I started seeing many of the same good-looking professional Black men I would see at Rascals. I was beginning to realize that I was not the only Black professional man who was seeking the same. I became friends with several of these men and began to develop my sissy sense, or gaydar, being able to detect gay men who were undercover about their sexuality. Without any type of initiation, I became a card-carrying member of another fraternity, Black men who led dual lives. I would spend a great deal of time at the straight bars on Fridays, trying to determine who I might see at the old plantation later. It never failed that some of the same womanizing men I admired on Friday would appear at the old plantation dancing with other men. So through his novels, he talks about these men who led these dual lives, and his stories were just so good, so entertaining. But we lost a treasure in E. Lynn Harris, and I will always appreciate his contribution to Black literature and literature overall, but to Black literature especially. So happy birthday, E. Lynn. We miss you terribly. And if you have not read a book by Lynn Harris, I would say my suggestion would be start with Invisible Life and then read in publication order. Not that you have to, but some of his characters make reappearances throughout his novels, and it would be nice to be able to follow the storyline. That's just my suggestion, but pick up anything by him and read it because his books are fun and they're very well written. I just love them. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a very good and blessed day. Until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye-bye.